Country music hits. You know it's time for another hour of Sports Talk Radio here on 95.3 WCHE. I'm host of Locker Room Buzz here, CJ Tully. Looking forward to giving you guys the latest in sports. We have a lot going on with college football, and if you guys have been listening a lot lately, you know college football has been what we've been hitting the absolute most. We have the college football playoffs well underway. We're going to have a huge game tonight between Miami and Ohio to close out 2025. Starting off 2026 tomorrow, we're going to have some big games in the SEC rematch against Ole Miss and Georgia, and then we're going to have ourselves Alabama taking on Indiana and Oregon taking on Texas Tech. I'll be getting to all of that later in the program, talking about everything going on in the playoffs. We also have bowl season well upon us now. We had a few of those games last weekend, and we're still continuing to see more today. Pretty much right after the show, you're going to be able to see Texas taking on Michigan. Now, still unclear as to how many starters are going in that. It does look like Arch Manning and Bryce Underwood will be going at quarterback in that one, so we'll see everything going on with that game as well. I have a guest with me today. I'll be bringing him in just a bit, but as I said, lots going on in college football. We also have the NFL. Don't forget all of that. We have our Philadelphia Eagles. They pick up another big win, be getting to that, and some crucial games coming up this weekend to determine who will find themselves in the NFL playoffs. We now have the extended NFL playoffs. Some of these teams not looking like true NFL Super Bowl contenders, but they are still making their way, so breaking down all of that. But that's all foreshadow. We do have a lot going on in college football. I'm going to kick off here with some of that. Some big news coming out of college football with Michigan hiring Kyle Whittingham. He signs a 5-year deal. He is leaving Utah, and he was pretty much set to retire, but Michigan having all of the scandal and everything, all the issues going on with them, they needed to bring in somebody to change the culture, to change the locker room, and somebody with great experience to be able to flip everything going on there. He is 66 years old, and that is almost 67. But a lot of people having issues with that. I don't know why the age is necessarily playing such a factor in some people's view of this. I would assume it's more so that he's not going to be with the new style of football and being able to run the program, how some of these places are adapting. With that as well, people are looking at Dabo Swinney and thinking his age and the way that he coaches football might be an issue with Clemson. So maybe it is the aging coaches not being able to fully render what is going on right now in the college football world, but we'll see what he's able to do there. He was stepping down, and now defensive coordinator Morgan Scalley will be promoted over there at Utah. He has won a school record 177 games with Utah, and they were ranked number 15 this year with a 10-2 record. So Kyle Whittingham has had a great standing there with Utah. He's a coach that a lot of people have highly touted. I know a lot of people in the Big Ten are loving this move, and he's had 18 winning seasons over there with Utah coming out of the Big 12. So we'll see what he's able to do for Michigan. He's not going to be at the helm today in their bowl game, but again, that program needs a lot of revamping. Not just the scandal they've had with Sharon Moore, but they also had their scandals with John Harbaugh last year, and how Sharon Moore had to sit out a few games as he was suspended as being a part of all that. So just a lot going on with that Michigan culture. They lose their first game in a while to Ohio State this year. That's the one thing they could have really held their hat on. They won the championship just a few years ago. So there's a lot going on with that Michigan program. I still think they will be able to compete for a while. Now, there is going to be a lot of discussion as to whether or not Bryce Underwood stays with Michigan. As I said, it does look like he's going to play in today's game, but does he stay with Michigan? Is there too much drama going on? Or will Kyle Whittingham be able to bring everybody together and really fix everything that's been going on in that program? So that's everything going on the Michigan side of things. But we also have some big news coming out of JMU, and they got their first break here in the college football playoffs just last week, where they got, I wouldn't even say stomped by Oregon, because they ended up making that a game. I will say a lot of that does come down to the fact that Oregon was scoring so quickly. They were able to see JMU get extra possessions. The stats didn't look all too bad. So you're able to see a lot going on there. But they're going to have 11 starters who will be needing to be replaced. Everybody starting in that game on offense will be leaving or graduating. You're going to have 4 graduating and 7 entering the portal. Among those going to the portal, you're going to have Alonzo Barrett III, their quarterback, and then Wayne Knight. He was their star player all season long, going for over 200 yards in a majority of the games there. So look to see what this JMU team is able to bring in. They're now a playoff team through the G5, so maybe that gives them some encouragement and some way to draw players in. But having to replace all 11 starters from the offensive line to your skill positions, that's going to be a lot for JMU. I'm not sure where that's going to leave them coming out of this. They are going to have a new head coach, so we'll see if that does anything for them as well. But with the transfer portal, this is something we're going to see a lot now. Some of these players getting some bigger stages to perform on, as JMU and Tulane just did in the college football playoffs. Not a lot of people expected them to be there. Not a lot of people were happy that they were there. But now you're going to be able to see an Alonzo Barrett III, a Wayne Knight, maybe go to a bigger program. But on the flip side of that, you have somebody like Mekhi Hughes over there for Tulane last year. He goes over to Oregon. He doesn't see the field, or he doesn't even get a plane ticket to go traveling with the team because he wanted to take that pay raise. He wanted to go to Oregon, a bigger program, after having a 2,000-yard season with Tulane, and it just hurts your draft chances and everything else. So maybe you're getting that bigger pay cut. Maybe you're going to a bigger market, but you're not going to have that same playing time. You can look at it like a JV player going to play and getting put on the team with the varsity group, but you're not necessarily getting the same playing time. You might have the higher standing, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same skill, or you're not going to be able to perform the same on a team with higher competition. So that's something I would keep an eye on with some of these players from the G5 or in the D2 standing, where they want to go up and they want to play in D1 football. You're just probably likely not going to be getting that same kind of positioning and everything else to set yourself up for the NFL draft. Now, to counteract my own point, you can look at Trinidad Chambliss, who played D2 football just last year, came into Ole Miss as the backup quarterback, took over, and now is one of the best mobile quarterbacks in college football. So you can look at that as a Cinderella story, and that's somebody who can flip their entire career on the dime, but that's not necessarily how it's going to work for everybody. So with everything that's going on in college football, with the transfer portal, with NIL deals, it's going to be really interesting to see who it pays off the best for. Some of these players are going to be taking the higher pay just to play in college, but then you might take that bounce back where you're not getting paid the exact same amount if you would be going into the NFL. So something to keep an eye on there. And some more local news, we're going to have Penn State running back Nick Singleton head to the draft. He is actually a Governor Mifflin alumni over there in high school. I cover them. They're up in Allentown, so that's some pretty big news for the local standings there. He's the all-time leader in all-purpose yards, rushing touchdowns, and overall touchdowns at Penn State. So he's definitely made an impact there. He did not play in their Pinstripe Bowl the other day. Would have loved to see a little bit more of him, but again, this is something we're seeing with bowl season. Players going to the draft, players really putting themselves out there. They don't want to take those extra hits or take any chance at an injury right before making the biggest payday of your life, seeing where you get drafted. He's going to be one of the biggest running backs coming into the draft. You're going to look at Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love as two of the other big running backs to head into the draft. So we'll see what Nick Singleton's able to do, where he's able to get drafted. There's a lot of speculation that the Cowboys looking for a running back. We'll see if Javonte Williams is their lead back going forward. I know there was a lot of talk between Jeremiah Love, but it would be sucky to see the local kid go over there and play for the Cowboys. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But there's a lot going on in college football. We're going to get to a lot more of it on the other end of this break. Stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and as I mentioned before the break, we have lots to get to here in college football. We have some bowl games that have happened. We have some more coming up. I have a special guest about to join the show who was at one of these bowl games. He'll give his entire perspective, and I'm going to be breaking down everything you need to know before the college football playoffs round 2 kick off today. But as always, let's talk some college football, and lots going on. As I mentioned before, we're going to get into all of it, but like I said, let's talk some college football. All right, so starting off here with the first bowl game we're going to talk about, let me introduce my guest to the show. We have Ryan Tully, my former co-host on Talk Tailgate with the Tully. It's been a minute since I said that one. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing fantastic, CJ. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about these bowl games. We'll start off with the one you were actually at on a snowy Yankee Field with the Penn State Nittany Lions taking on the Clemson Tigers. Your second time seeing the Clemson Tigers this year. What did you make of the atmosphere, and most importantly, what was the game like?
So the atmosphere was awesome. I think for it being a baseball stadium, they did a great job of setting up the football field on it. The Penn State fans, because of being so close, so close to in the local area, there was a lot more Penn State fans than Clemson, which was a completely different scenario from the last time I was in the Clemson game because I was in the Clemson section. Clemson fans are still really brutal. Again, don't go to the school, was getting chirped again. But the game itself wasn't great. I know you talked about with the players not playing in bowl games. Penn State's whole offensive line wasn't there, so Grunkelmeyer took a lot of sacks and took a lot of hits in the backfield. It was a 9-3 game at halftime. Penn State eventually ended up getting a big touchdown from Trevor Pena. He ended up winning MVP, so that was really cool to see. But and my seats are great. I was right behind the dugout, like right behind the Clemson dugout. Got to see Cade Klubnik up front and center. I think it was cool that he played, so that was cool to see like a starting player. Yeah, the game itself wasn't great, but the atmosphere was awesome. Penn State fans really did show up and show out. It was a Clemson home game, so they didn't play like the Penn State fight song really much, but it was really cool to be there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. I was looking at tickets. I thought they were going to drop just based on the snow and everything else, but it seemed like a lot of people had the hope that a lot of people would show up and buy those tickets. So sure, that was an awesome atmosphere. You mentioned Trevor Pena in the day. He had winning MVP, 5 receptions for 100 yards. As you mentioned, getting in the end zone. Neither of the running backs started. I mentioned Nick Singleton just a bit ago. Quentin Martin Jr., he goes for 20 carries and 103 yards. Watching the game, I didn't really notice him having a crazy day.
He broke off like it was 20 carries. So he broke off like a bunch of like 5 yard, 5 yards. And then he had like a couple bigger runs, but they kind of mixed up the running back situation there.
And then Grunkenmeyer, he goes 23 for 34, 260 yards with 2 touchdowns. I've been hearing a lot that he might be the answer at Penn State. Now with the transfer portal being so prevalent to everybody, maybe they are able to bring in another mobile quarterback. I know a lot of people weren't a huge fan of Drew Aller. They let go of Bo Pribula last year in the playoffs and let him go over to Missouri. It is said that he might be entering the transfer portal again, so you might be able to see a reuniting of Penn State and with Bo Pribula, so we'll see what happens with that. On the Clemson side of things, they're going to need a shake up as well. Cade Klubnik will be going into the NFL draft. Now, before the season, he was one of the players who was really highly touted going into the draft. He was going to be a first-round overall pick. Still might get that, but you obviously aren't getting the same kind of Cade Klubnik you thought you were going to get. He was my pick for a Heisman. I had Clemson winning the national championship, so all of that meant absolutely nothing. But Klubnik goes 22 for 39, 193 yards, does not get himself a touchdown. And then you saw Adam Randall, and he was an experiment that I was really looking forward to seeing this year. He was the wide receiver turned running back. You saw him first try this out in the playoffs last year against Texas, where he was the running back. He had about 55 yards in that. They let him get the full helm now this season going at running back. He finished this game with 35 yards on 11 carries. It's an interesting experiment. That's why I was curious to see how it played out. Doesn't seem like something that I would revert back to. He hasn't had the greatest season this year. I mean, you can look at it as a running back, wide receiver going to running back. Does have 814 yards with 10 touchdowns. Not a horrible season, but not exactly what they would have expected out of him and what they would have needed from him with how poorly this offense had gone all season long. You did see Antonio Williams out a majority of the season. He was their number one wide receiver and somebody I thought would be up for a wide receiver award this season. So when you have all of that missing, you start slow to the start of the season. You lose to LSU. You can definitely see where Clemson just wasn't able to get themselves back together after that. But a bowl game that I do want to talk about, and one that if you guys follow me on LRBuzz_pod, that is on TikTok and Instagram, made a whole video about it. I believe the Pop-Tart Bowl this year is exactly what the College Football Playoff Committee and everything else was looking to see here in the bowl season. Now, this is a game where you were supposed to see Notre Dame. Actually, you were supposed to see Notre Dame in the playoffs, but you do get to see them. You're going to be able to see them here in the Pop-Tart Bowl. They opt out, obviously, leaving Georgia Tech, number 24, to take on number 12, BYU. And this game was going to be exciting heading into it. Haynes King has had himself a nice season, mostly on the ground, but late in the season, you were able to see him get it going with his arm. They did have a bad loss to Georgia to finish out the season, only putting up 9 points in that game, but you were expecting a lot out of Haynes King in this one. The other side, Bear Brockmeyer, he's been playing great for BYU, and you saw their coach Kalani. He was a possible Penn State hire. They end up saying, no, we're going to pay you enough money to where we don't need you to go anywhere else. You can stay here with us. So this is a game where nobody opted out. So it was really exciting to see that part of it. But Georgia Tech, they blew an 11-point lead in the second half, and it was all capitalized on a BYU interception in the end zone thrown by Haynes King. You did see Georgia Tech was playing for their 10th win this season. That would have been the first time they would have done so since 2014. So lots on the line in this one. Bear Brockmeyer wins the MVP, going 325 yards through the air with a touchdown and an interception. Haynes King, still a solid day, 270, 2 touchdowns with an interception. So, Ryan, is this the kind of game that you're looking to see more bowl participants participate in and the kind of level of competition that you want to see?
Yeah, I think I've always loved the Pop-Tart Bowl. Every year it's so funny when you see like the Pop-Tarts, they like strip with the wrapping and everything, and then they go in the toaster. That whole aspect of it is like the exciting part. And then you always want to see people play in the bowl games. I mean, obviously you want to see the top players playing at the top level of competition, but you have to understand, like, there is that aspect of, like, think about it, Nick Singleton going to the draft. He gets hurt in a bowl game, that tanks his draft stock. So there is that whole idea of like, I do fear for injury, but on the flip side, you do get that last chance to prove yourself to the NFL. Maybe you jump up other people. But yeah, I think the Pop-Tart Bowl this year especially really set the tone for how bowl games should go, with everyone playing, the like camaraderie around it, the excitement, like that whole aspect was like the perfect example of what a bowl game should be. And I'd love to see that more, but I just don't think it's realistic with the fear of injuries, especially with how much an injury can tank your draft stock.
Yeah, so there's, besides from that, obviously being the epitome of what you want to see in a bowl game, we've had a lot of other games as well. Now, some of the competition here isn't always equally balanced, and some of these teams you don't necessarily care to see play another game, but obviously it's all about the money, money, money. Where can we slot a team? Where can we get some TV deals going on with that? But one game that stood out to me was the North Texas game against San Diego State. Now, again, this is a game I had no interest in. I've covered North Texas a little bit this season. They were one of the top teams fighting for that spot in the American with Tulane, and they had a big game against Navy earlier this season. But North Texas, their quarterback, Drew Messemaker, he's going to be entering the portal. He did not have a game that you want to see right before you might take a guy in. Now, this game was 49-47 with North Texas pulling out the win, but he goes 250 with 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Definitely not a bright spot for him necessarily. But you look at the running back, Caleb Hawkins, the freshman. He had himself 198 yards with 2 touchdowns, a big day for him. And then Drew Messemaker with just 18 rushing yards. Now, Drew Messemaker is somebody I want you guys to keep an eye on when it does come to the transfer portal. Obviously, like I said, not finishing out the season strongly. But this season, 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He's a phenomenal pocket passer. When I did my breakdown between Navy and North Texas, Navy is definitely more of a run-heavy team. They had almost 2,000 yards rushing by their quarterback. Meanwhile, Messemaker was doing it all through the air. So somebody to keep an eye on there. That was definitely an interesting game to watch. You look at some of these other games, LSU Houston, that came down to the wire there, 38-35 win by Houston over LSU. LSU obviously sitting a lot of their starters as well. You had a game last night between Illinois and Tennessee, where Illinois quarterback Luke Altmaier decks one of the referees, so that was fun to watch. You're kind of getting these like fun moments out of these games more so than great competition, I would say. And then you had a phenomenal finish to the TCU USC game last night. Came down to a final phenomenal play on the outside corner there. So lots of fun moments. Again, some of these games meaning absolutely nothing. More so to some of these players that are looking to make a break, see if they can see what you get next year out of them. Kind of like the spring training of college football, I would say, where you're looking to prove something for next season. Maybe we don't have to bring in a wide receiver through the transfer portal because we're seeing how well a young player is playing right now. I would say it was kind of the same thing last year with Georgia in the playoffs, where you got to see Gunnar Stockton come in when Carson Beck was hurt. That then gave you a little bit more light that, okay, Gunnar Stockton can play. We don't need to go out there and bring somebody else in after Carson Beck heads to Miami. So anytime some of these players get a little bit of an angle that they can prove themselves and just put out a little bit of competition, a little bit of energy, I think that's good for the players. Again, these aren't games that you're going to want to tune into necessarily if they're on. Like I put on the Houston LSU game knowing that nobody huge was playing, but just to see some of these guys get more familiar for next season. And then with everybody joining the transfer portal, maybe you are able to see somebody who wasn't necessarily going to join but now made a big moment and they're going to get an offer from somebody else. So all that stuff is very interesting to keep an eye on. It does seem more like the NFL or the college football is becoming the minor leagues of the NFL, especially with the way the money is being distributed. So if you are able to work your angles in the quote-unquote minor leagues here in college football, build yourself a little bit more stock when you do get to the NFL. It's definitely good for the players there. Going on further with the bowl games, we're going to have some big ones coming up today. Iowa, number 23, is going to take on Vanderbilt. We're going to see Diego Pavea for maybe the final time in his entire career because it doesn't seem like he's going to get that eligibility to play next year. And unless he wants to be the best XFL player in history, I don't know if we're going to be seeing him in the NFL with the way that his attitude is gone, the way that a lot of people have wanted to redact their vote for him for Heisman. So we'll see what happens with him. He gets one final game today. That will be at 12 o'clock. At Iowa, on the other end, I love Iowa. They are the perfect build of a football team, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not the traditional guy who likes, airing the ball out and just throwing it downfield. They work the tight ends, they work their run game, and they have a phenomenal defense. And I gave any team that beat them this season credit for that win. Obviously, not finishing highly at the 23 rank right now, but if you could beat a team like that, that gives you toughness going into the playoffs and everything else. So be fun to watch that game. Arizona State taking on Duke. You're going to be able to see what Manny Diaz is able to do with Duke. He was another possible contender there for the coaching position with Penn State. And on the Arizona State side of things, they rehired their coach. He had a whole statement about how he wants people in the state to bring more money in so that they can bring in some bigger players. They're going to have their number one quarterback, Sam Levitt. He's going to be going into the transfer portal. So He's vouching for more money so that they don't lose these players and they're able to compete with the best. And then tonight I previewed it. We're going to have Michigan taking on Texas at 3 o'clock. That's the 18 versus the 13. We'll see if Arch Manning is really about that or if it was all just a fluke. So we'll see everything that happens with that. When we come back from this quick break, I'll be breaking down everything you guys need to know for the college football playoffs. Stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and lots to still get to here in college football. We talk about all of the bowl games, but we're going to have ourselves some bigger games going on here with the college football playoffs. Starting off tonight, this is, I know, Ryan's favorite team going at it here tonight with Miami. We're going to have Miami taking on number 1 seed Ohio State. Now, there's lots to break down in these games. I'll try and get to everything in our time slot here. So this will be the Cotton Bowl, and last week we saw Miami go head-to-head with Texas A&M in a very windy game, and that is a big part of this game. It's impacted a lot, and it kind of tilts the way you can think of Miami, because if you saw Miami earlier this season, you wouldn't view them the same as how they played in that game against Texas A&M. So they win that one 10-3. They get the late touchdown to make the difference. They do miss 3 field goals in that game. And again, this is where I'm saying you can't judge that game just by the numbers, because if you saw the way that wind was whipping, the kicker would kick it at the left post, and it would end up in the right bleacher. So there was no way for them to really figure that part out. You looked at Texas A&M, and their offense was able to get nothing going. A lot of this came to Marcel Reed not being able to find his receivers, a lot of things being overthrown. You could take that to the wind as well. He does throw 2 interceptions, though, and those played very big into the game. You saw Bryce Fitzgerald pick up both of those interceptions. So can Miami's defense be another determining factor here? And not only can the defense, but their run game was able to get going. And this was something coming into the windy game that I thought would have favored Texas A&M, as they had a lethal backfield of Reuben Owens II, and they had Le'Veon Moss coming back. But it was Mark Fletcher Jr. making the difference for Miami. Had 172 yards on the day. So can Miami get back to that? Carson Beck, 10 interceptions on the season, and with not being able to turn the ball over, that was the difference. As I did say before, you saw Marcel Reed throw the 2 interceptions, so those possessions made everything change in this game. So can they fix that? Carson Beck with just 103 yards on the day. Can they get Malachi Toney more involved? You didn't see all too much of him last week. Same with C.J. Daniels. He's somebody we saw Carson Beck go to a lot to finish out the season. These are the guys he's going to have to rely on. But with the way that Ohio State is able to lock you down on defense, this team's going to have to be versatile. You can't be just passing the ball. You can't just rely on Mark Fletcher Jr. You're going to have to find different ways to break the core of this Ohio State defense. One of the biggest things that Miami can play off right now is the fact that they haven't played in a few weeks. You haven't seen Ohio State in a while, and the last game you saw them in was a heartbreaking loss in the Big Ten Championship to Fernando Mendoza and to Indiana. So even in that, you can look at Fernando Mendoza beating Julian Sain for the Heisman. Maybe that knocks Julian Sain off a pedestal a little bit. Maybe he's, I don't know, this is all just speculation, but maybe he's thinking a little bit more about the way he plays. So there's a lot of things that have changed since that game against Indiana that you're now going to have to see them bring to light here in this game against Miami. Something else that is going to be really funny if it doesn't play out well for them is they said Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate this season, kind of sitting them out saying these are all preseason games. Once we get to the playoffs, we'll play our best. If they're not ready to go or they're not up to the top of competition, that could hurt them as well. You do have Ohio State coming in with the number 1 defense in college football, opposed to Miami with the number 11 defense right now in college football. So these are 2 teams that you can't just push aside on either side of the ball. This could be a very hard-fought battle. The line is right now at 9.5, so that's favoring Ohio State, of course. Started at 11.5, so kind of coming down a little bit. Maybe people are getting more faith in this Miami team, but again, can they get it done? You have a lot of talent on Ohio State. A lot of them are going to be going to the NFL draft. You have players like Caleb Downs on defense. In the backfield, you have C.J. Donaldson and Bo Jackson. So everywhere you look on this Ohio State team, there is huge talent. Can Miami match that? I don't know. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously I am like a self-proclaimed Ohio State fan, but my biggest thing with this one is, while, yeah, the win was a big factor last week, Miami's defense did come up to play when they needed to. They got the stops when they needed to. And with a young quarterback, Julian Sain's a freshman, I believe, and you have this younger offense. While there's a lot of talent, they are younger. A lot of their guys have gone to the NFL the last couple of years. So with a good, strong defense like Miami, it does scare me a little bit that coming with the momentum, especially Ohio State hasn't played in 2 weeks. They lost their last game with the really only competition they did play all season long. Obviously, they had the big win over Texas, which wasn't a beautiful win, but it was a win over a highly ranked team. And then you lose your only other game against a good ranked team. So to me, this is a big game for Julian Sayin. I feel like he needs to come out here and play strong, especially going forward. If they do win this one, you want to have that momentum going into when you do possibly play Georgia, Indiana again, these higher ranked teams where right now you've only really played poor competition and dominated the poor competition. Like, while that's good, you haven't played competition. So to me, this is a big statement game for Julian Sayin and this Ohio State offense. I think their defense will be fine. I think you can contain Carson Beck. Like you said, his interceptions have been a problem this year. So if you can kind of work that angle and kind of slow down their offense, I think just put the ball in Julian Sayin's hand and let him do what he did. He did have a Heisman opportunity this year, so just let him do his thing. And I think get the run game going and just to open up the pass game would be huge for Ohio State.
Yeah, you mentioned that win over Texas, and you look at the two games they played against great competition with the Texas and the Indiana. They only put up 14 points in that game against Texas, one of the best defenses they saw this year. And then they go against Indiana with, I believe, the fourth best defense in college football right now. They only put up 10 points. So can Sayin get around a good defense, or is it more so just being able to battle with the mediocre teams? He beat a Penn State team at home that obviously wasn't the same Penn State team as they were. He was able to avoid playing Oregon this year. They didn't have to play Iowa. Their next toughest game would have been at Washington, and that's a game that a lot of teams in the Big Ten were able to win. So even that lost a lot of its juice, and that's why I always say that Oregon has the best resume in the Big Ten. I'll get to that when we break down that game, but you look at some of these wins, and I hate to discredit Ohio State because it's kind of like discrediting the Astros or the Chiefs. It's like this is the team that everybody's hyped up and everything has gone their way, so how can you really hate? But I don't believe in preseason rankings. I think they give you a false narrative as to what a team is supposed to be just based on a few guys sitting in a room or what you saw last year, and that's why Ohio State is highly ranked right now after beating Texas, who we saw how they played out. And then you see they won the championship last year, but they lost so many players that they had to revamp this offense and this defense for the most part as well. So can they be that same team? That's what we're going to have to see tonight. That game will be at, I believe, 8 o'clock. Lots of exciting stuff there. I'll break it down afterwards as well. You can check out everything as well. I'll be keeping up-to-date scores and stats on my website, letstalksports.com, so you can check all of that out as well. And if you need a more in-depth breakdown, you can go on YouTube and Spotify at Let's Talk Sports. That's Let's TAWK Sports. Little plug there, but we do have some more games to break down, so let's get right to that. We have Oregon taking on Texas Tech tomorrow afternoon. That will be number 5 Oregon taking on number 4 Texas Tech. This will be in the Orange Bowl. Now, before I go any further with this game, I've said since this bracket came out that the winner of this game is going to be in the national championship picture, and in my opinion, they're going to win the national championship. These teams are built so well on both sides of the ball, both very underrated in my opinion. You look at Oregon, and now I'll get into the fact that I think they had the best resume in the Big Ten. They were able to go on the road and beat Iowa in Iowa's kind of conditions. As I mentioned before, Iowa is a team that likes to run the ball. They play great defense, and it was pouring rain in that game. This had everything made up to be an Iowa win over Oregon, and it wasn't the most pretty win by Oregon. We saw Dante Moore go late in that game with the ball in his hands. He goes down and picks up that win. They were able to throw the ball well. They were able to run it down the throats of this Iowa defense. So that was a huge win in my opinion. You look at their biggest win of the season was at Penn State in a whiteout in overtime. And yes, Penn State fell apart. But you look at that game, and could you not say that that was a game that tore everything apart for Penn State, that really was the final dagger in Penn State, was the fact that they weren't able to win at home in a whiteout, in overtime with the ball in Drew Aller's hands. That is the dagger to me. That is when I think the speculation started with James Franklin, that maybe you're not cut out to be the guy. Everything, College Game Day was there. That game had everything on it, and they didn't show up in the biggest moments. Oregon does, though. They went on the road and won that game. That is a big win, and I will fight anybody on that fact. Then you look at the end of the season. They were able to close it out with a win against USC, who still had a chance at the playoffs. They were number 15 when they played that game, if I'm not mistaken. And they finished the season out with a win at Washington. And that win at Washington is exactly what I said was Ohio State's biggest win. So if you want to count that for Ohio State, you got to count it big for Oregon as well. And then you look over to the playoff game. And as I mentioned, you were able to let up a few late game points there to JMU last weekend. But this team showed up in a big way. Dante Moore, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. The one big takeaway I'd have is that he can't throw 2 interceptions because that's not going to slide when you play this greater competition, and especially with a team like Texas Tech and the way that defense runs. But this backfield has been absolutely lethal for this Oregon team, and even Dan Lanning had said this isn't where they expected the team to be. This was a powerhouse on the outside. You had DeCorian Moore, you have Kenyon Sadiq at tight end. This team could beat you from the outside. Now they're beating you on the inside as well, and that makes this team so dynamic. You look at Jordan Davidson, you look at Daryl Hill Jr., and you look at Noah Whittington. These are three guys that weren't even highly ranked coming into the season as big players in the college football power rankings at running back. Mekhi Hughes, my boy, he was supposed to be the guy that was getting everything. You look at we were playing the college football video game the other day, and he's got a star factor. He was supposed to be the big deal. Malik Benson on the outside. So many of these guys have showed up in bigger ways than Oregon could have ever expected, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that here coming down to this game. They had a huge 36-3 lead over JMU last week at halftime, so if you can have that, yes, that game, again, you let the points up late, but this was a dominant win. You had a punt return touchdown, you had a fumble, or that was on a blocked punt. So just many different ways they can beat you, and this defense has been very underrated in my opinion as well. They are still finishing in the top 15 of overall defense. Flipping the script over to Texas Tech. Who is Texas Tech? Not a lot of people are familiar with this team coming out of the Big 12. Not a lot of those flashy players. They spent the most in the transfer portal this year, but nobody that really grabbed your attention. They didn't bring in an Arch Manning or a DJ Lagway. They have Baron Morton at their quarterback, and he's not somebody that's very boastful either. Joey McGuire has been a phenomenal coach for them as well. He's coming out of being a high school coach. He's a great leader of men, and just hearing some of his interviews, he's a very old school, traditional guy. He's not with all this stuff going on in the world right now. He's very to the textbook, I'll say. So you look at somebody like that being able to lead this group. You have Dan Lanning over there for Oregon, two great coaches. But this Texas Tech team is built on defense. They are one of the best teams in college football when it comes to defending third downs. You look on the outsides, they have players as well. At linebacker, they had number 5 finishing Heisman finalist in Jacob Rodriguez. Who has ever heard of a linebacker finishing in the top 5 of a Heisman competition? That says a lot about this program and a lot about him as a player. You look at this offense. You have Coy Eakin, you have Reggie Virgil, you have Terrence Lawrence Jr. on the outside at tight end. This team can beat you in a lot of ways. Their only loss this season was to Arizona State when you didn't have Baron Morton in the backfield. It was Will Hammond going for you, and even that was a close game, just the way this defense is able to play. Final thing I'll say on them, 12 of their wins this season were by 20-plus points. So that says a lot about this team, beating on both sides of the ball. We'll see what happens with this one, though. Ryan, any big takeaways you have on this game?
Yeah, so I would like to defend your point. You did talk very highly about both of these teams, said that this would be a team that got into the Heisman, whoever wins this game. The thing I think is going to be awesome about this game is from the games I've watched of Oregon, their offense is very dynamic and very elite. And you talk a lot about the Texas defense. So I love when a good offense goes against a good defense because it becomes an actual battle. And I'm really excited for that. I think that Dante Moore is, like, from what I've seen, he's looked great. And I think he could be a NFL talented quarterback. I don't know when he is going into the draft this year. Okay, so I think he could be a quarterback that succeeds in the NFL. There's not a lot of quarterbacks from this year that I believe could do that, and I think Dante Moore has the structure of a mobile quarterback who also can sling it when he needs to. And then, like CJ said, a linebacker in the Heisman conversation isn't like a small feat. That is something that you don't ever see. It's kind of like if a linebacker was in the MVP conversation, which you never see. And so to me, I think this is going to be a great battle of good defense versus good offense, and I'm really excited to see who can pull that one out.
Yeah, again, I do believe winner of this goes to the championship. I think that relies on the defenses, and I think that's how this difference will be made in this game, is who can make that one play on defense to flip the script, who can make that big play. And speaking of big plays, we saw that last week with Alabama making that big play against Oklahoma, and that flipped Alabama's entire season, and now we're seeing them go up against Indiana in the Rose Bowl. That will be our next game we talk about here. Alabama, number 9, taking on number 1 Indiana. Now, Indiana was not a team most people would have thought would be the number 1 team coming into the college football playoffs. It did come down to that Big Ten championship game where they were able to knock off Ohio State. So where should we start? Let's look at Alabama here. Ty Simpson. I know a lot of people have their criticisms with Ty Simpson. He had 232 yards in their last game against Oklahoma with 2 touchdowns. Daniel Hill, he had 9 carries and 43 yards with a touchdown. He has been Oklahoma's weakness, though. Even when they played earlier this season, he was able to find the end zone twice. And you saw Jam Miller come back into this game after missing a week of injury. But this backfield's still not making a big enough difference to give me a lot of confidence in this Alabama team. You saw Jam Miller, he goes for just 7 or 11 yards in his comeback game here. And you looked at that SEC championship game, and it looked like they'd never seen a running back in their lives, just not able to hand the ball off. They weren't able to get anything going. But I do believe that if you look back at Ohio State last year and their win over Michigan and everybody hating on them and everybody saying they don't belong and this and that, That was Alabama's SEC championship against Georgia, where everybody's now ruling them out. His offense can't get anything going. Kalen DeBoer is going to go over to Penn State. He's going to leave this organization. Alabama's a bust without Nick Saban. And then they go down 17 to Oklahoma. And at halftime, or right before halftime, everybody's saying this game's over. And Oklahoma is just going to upset Alabama. We're going to see everything happen. They end up going down 17-10, and they get a huge pick six that flips the entire game and gives Alabama a win over Oklahoma, as Oklahoma just completely died after that interception, and they just weren't able to get their offense going again. So there's a lot to take away from this Alabama team. This is going to be a big challenge for them. You saw their top wide receiver, Ryan Williams, has just and has anybody seen him? Because he goes last week for just a reception and 5 yards after being one of the most dominant players in college football last year. And then you saw this year, he's on the cover of the college football video game. Just everything was gearing towards this guy and Jeremiah Smith being the difference makers in college football, and Ryan Williams just has not been him this year. You've seen Latsier Brooks, Isaiah Horton, and Jeremy Bernard. They've been the ones to step up. You had Brooks go for 2 touchdowns last week. So if this offense can get going, if Ty Simpson can stay in the pocket, get time, that's where I can see this offense start to go. With that being said, though, you're going to need to run the ball. You have Indiana as the number 4 defense in college football right now. And if you become one-dimensional and you can't get the run game going, and then they lock you down on the outsides, that's where this game can get very, very ugly for this Alabama offense, because that's what Georgia was able to do to them. They let them run the ball, and they couldn't get anything going. They weren't even able to find their running backs out of the backfield. So that's where Indiana's going to have the leg up. I think it comes more down to Indiana's defense than it does their offense. We do have Heisman Fernando Mendoza in this game, though. Love everything about that guy. He is somebody that deserves the praise, deserves the awards, and that's the kind of person that you want to be parading around that your sport has. Somebody like a Tim Tebow even, or somebody who does such good things on the field and off the field. That's who you want to see get that kind of praise, and you can really root for a guy like that. So we'll see what Mendoza's able to do this season. 2,900 yards, 33 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions. Their biggest weapons I'm going to be looking for here is Charlie Becker, Elijah Surratt, and Omar Cooper Jr. If you guys remember, Omar Cooper Jr. had that amazing catch in the back of the end zone, which has to be the number 1 play of the season. Or the year. But you look over at some of these guys, and they make the plays. Fernando Mendoza didn't win the Heisman necessarily because of his stats, but it's the way that he was able to win football games. You look at that Penn State game, final drive, goes down and wins it. At Oregon, goes down, wins that game as well. At Iowa, goes down, wins that game as well. It's those moments that puts you over some of these other players. It might not be the flashy numbers that Pavia had, but you look at the competition of who he's able to beat. What can he do in crunch time, in the clutchest moments of his career? And he goes out and he wins them. He wins a tight 13-10 game over Ohio State as well in the Big Ten championship game, and that's something that Ohio State is very familiar with, is those kind of games. This was Indiana just slotting themselves in there, trying to see what they had. Curt Cignetti getting his new 8-year deal at head coach. So this is an Indiana team that can make some noise in the playoffs, but if Alabama is able to get some kind of run game going and they're able to find their receivers, this game could be a real duel to the end. But if they can't get anything going, I see Indiana winning big in this one.
Yeah, my biggest thing coming into this one is this is Fernando Mendoza's, to me, his statement game. He has played, obviously he's in the Big Ten, where there is a lot of talk about not a lot of competition. You have teams like Penn State, like CJ said, they beat Iowa, they beat Oregon. Oregon's probably their biggest win right now, and then they go into the Big Ten championship and beat Ohio State. So they have big wins in a division, in a conference that a lot of people aren't highly touted on. There's not a lot of talk about the Big Ten being the big bad. This is their first game against an SEC competition this year where it's a good Alabama team. And to me, I think Fernando Mendoza, to prove that he is elite and that, not that he should have won the Heisman, I do believe that he should win the Heisman. He played great in games where he needed to. And to me, this is just his game to say, I'm not just good against the Big Ten. I'm a good quarterback. This can show NFL teams that he's elite against any competition. And I think this is really a big game for Fernando Mendoza. On the flip side, like you said, Alabama has no run game. And I think that's where a lot of criticism comes to Ty Simpson, is because he's put in situations where he has to throw the ball more. Obviously, when you throw the ball more, you have a higher chance of interceptions, bad throws. And I think a lack of a run game really does make a quarterback look worse, because you are putting the ball into a quarterback's hand a lot more. Ryan Williams, absolutely absent all year long. People were hyping him up all last year and really excited to see what he could do. And then you just take him out of the game. So I think for Alabama to be able to win the national championship, you have to get back to Ryan Williams being a big factor. And so, in my opinion, I think this is a bigger game for Indiana just because of the competition level, and to prove that, yeah, we are a 1 seed, we are a top team in college football. Because like you said, there's still doubts because they weren't supposed to be this great team, and now you have the Heisman and the 1 seed on the same team. So, in my opinion, I think that Indiana needs to win this one, and I think it's going to come from just eliminating the pass game and forcing Ty Simpson to be great.
Yeah, and the final game we're going to have here is Ole Miss at Georgia. We'll get through this one quickly. It's going to be in the Sugar Bowl, and I've been vacillating a lot on my pick as to who I'm going to take in this one because I do think this is a great competition. We saw the matchup earlier this season. Trinidad Chambliss rushed for 2 touchdowns in that one, but the biggest thing in this game was coming down to the fourth quarter. Georgia outscores Ole Miss 17-0 in that fourth quarter to win 43-35, and this was a huge statement for Georgia at the time, as even I was saying that they weren't able to win the big games. They're able to do that there in that one. And now you look at this Georgia team of late, and they have completely rewritten their season. This defense has stepped up in tremendous ways in their last 4 games. You look at the game against Texas. They allow only 10 points to them. They go for an onside kick late. I mean, they made a statement in that game. The following week, they take on Charlotte. They let up just 3 points in that game. Then after that, they take on Georgia Tech, who was still fighting for a playoff spot. They only let up 9 points to them. SEC championship game against Alabama, just 7 points. So this defense has been able to be the difference. This is a Kirby Smart team that is finally getting back to the roots of playing defense. Gunnar Stockton hasn't cost them games, which is huge. And I think this game comes down to how well Georgia steps up to Trinidad Chambliss and Coban Lacey, because if Lacey gets it going on the ground, that can be a real problem for this Georgia defense. But you look back to their last game, and Quan Lacey had one of his worst starts of the year against Georgia. So seems like Georgia has found that cure. Trinidad Chambliss, though, has been a difference maker with his legs as well. So we'll see what happens with that. You also have no Lane Kiffin doing the play calling. So things will be a little bit different. I do think Georgia comes out of this one, though.
Yeah, like you said, the last time that these two teams played, Quan Lacey having one of his worst games. Georgia's defense has been a story all year long. I remember when I was on the show last time, we talked about who we thought was going to win the national championship. I did have Georgia because of how strong their defense has been playing. I think that big statement win in the SEC championship was very important for them. And you just sit there and you hope that they can keep it up against a good competition like Ole Miss, especially when they fell apart. But losing Lane Kiffin was a big blow, and I think that does hurt them in this game. I know last week it didn't, or was it last week? When they played Tulane, it didn't hurt them as much as I thought it would. They still came out, and Quan Lacey had a huge first drive. So, my opinion, the thing you have to do if you're Georgia is slow down Quan Lacey, force Trinidad Chambliss to make the plays, to be great. Gunnar Stockton, I think he's a guy who's just there to not lose them games. He's kind of that game manager role. So if your defense can shut them down and Gunnar Stockton can just do his job and not try and do anything too spectacular, you can win this game if you're Georgia.
All right, when we come back, we have lots to get to in the NFL, and I know Ryan has lots to talk about on that, so stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. And welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully. We have lots to get to still before we close out the year. I'll even give you guys my favorite play of the year and some of the things that we look forward to here going into 2026. But we had lots to talk about in the NFL as well. You look here, Christmas Day games didn't give us too much to talk about, so we'll move forward on those. I mean, you need to put, I get before the season, those would have been great competition. But then you look at the games and it's like, oh, Commanders, Cowboys. Wow, they're playing for the 18th seed. Texans, on the other hand, though, I do want to talk about them. They have had themselves a huge resurgence of late. You saw what Davis Mills was able to do, keeping them alive. Now you bring back C.J. Stroud, and this team is fighting for this. I believe they're still fighting for the 1 spot, right? They can still get the 1 spot in the South.
The Texans?
Yeah.
No, they cannot. I don't.
Okay, never mind. But they're still in the playoffs, so we're looking forward to that. They just picked up a 20-16 win over the Chargers. They're now 11-5 on the season. I'm pretty sure the Jags are just 11-4 though, right? That wouldn't even make sense. All right, never mind.
No, I think it's the Broncos would have to lose and the Jags lose. Actually, they might. I'm sorry. They might have.
Not the 1 seed overall. I'm talking about the win division.
Oh, in the division.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what
division.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm at. Something that's big about this team, though, is they lost their first 3 games of the season. It was looking like it was just going downhill. I am a self-proclaimed Texans fan, more of a C.J. Stroud fan, but this team has been getting it going of late. 8-game win streak now, and they've been beating some big teams. They pretty much eliminated the Colts from any kind of contention. Woody Marks has been a huge player that stood out for them. You have Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb in the backfield, and it's Woody Marks making his statement. So lots going on with this team. Their defense is the number 1 team right now in yards allowed with 272 per game, number 5 in sacks, and number 2 in turnovers, forcing 14 turnovers this season. So does this Texans team have a real shot?
Yes. I don't believe so. I think that they're a team that might succeed in the regular season, but I think there is teams in the AFC especially that can be more dominant than them. I know this was a big win against a competitive Chargers team, but if you looked at that game, Justin Herbert has nothing. That offensive line is one of the worst I've ever seen put together. If you look at their things, it's like 33rd ranked out of 33, 29. Just a horrible offensive line. I will say I was very low on this Texans team all year long, and they really have turned it around, and CJ Stroud has looked really good to a point where, like, if he clicked earlier in the season, I think that he could have been in this MVP conversation even. And so it does not scare me because I'm not like a fan of an AFC team, but I do think they could make a run. I don't think they're Super Bowl ready, but I do think they have that chance.
Yeah, and then some of the other big games you got to look at here is Ravens or Steelers. They're going to be having a big matchup next weekend. Winner goes to the playoffs and wins the AFC North. I'm going to take the Steelers in this one. I just love to see that story. I like to see Aaron Rodgers get one last ride at it. Now, DK Metcalf certainly doesn't want to be a part of that ride. After slapping one of the fans, he's still going to be out in this game. That could be crucial there. But Kenny Gainwell, my boy Kenny G, he's made a difference. 527 yards this season on the ground, as well as 422 yards through the air. So that's something the Eagles could have really used this year. So good to see him making an effort there. You do have Derrick Henry looking like he's getting back to his ways, though. 36 carries for 216 yards and 4 touchdowns in their last game. That was a win over the Packers. Ryan, Ravens or Steelers?
I'm going to go with the Ravens just because I think that the Ravens have a better chance of being successful in the playoffs than the Steelers. I think the Steelers team, they don't have, like, while they have DK Metcalf and the run game has been surprisingly well, I don't think that they're good enough to be competitive. I think that the Ravens, while they've had a poor season, have the experience and have the talent to go and make a run at it, whereas I think the Steelers team would be a one-and-done team.
You look at Lamar Jackson, still questionable with a back contusion, though. So if you're without him and if he doesn't want it bad enough, obviously he would sit out of that one. Another game that's do or die is going to be the Bucs and the Panthers. They're going to be battling it out for the NFC South. You look at the Bucs; they've been absolutely horrible this season. They've now lost 7 of their last 8 games. Emeka Egbuka has not had a touchdown since week 9. So this team has certainly taken a bit of a step back. He has 6 touchdowns on the season. And then you look at this Panthers team, and yes, they've been getting it going a little bit more of late, but they've won every other week. Every time they pick up a win, they take up a loss the next week. So Ryan, Bucs or the Panthers?
I'm gonna go with the Panthers just because there's a couple ways that the Panthers can get into the playoffs here, and they've looked like a better team. The Bucs team, Baker Mayfield was an MVP candidate after like week 2 or 3, and then just completely wet the bed. They have no run game anymore. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White have both been doing nothing since Bucky Irving's come back. Emeka Egbuka has been absent in this offense. So when you have all these weapons and you're still not able to beat poor competition, to me, that's got to be a huge factor. Panthers win gets them in, or a loss and a Falcons win gets them in. So in my opinion, I think that's got to be the Panthers getting in there.
Yeah, I would love to see the Bucs. I'm wearing my Tampa hat now. I'd love to see them make a run. I think that team has a lot to them. And I'd love to see Baker finally get to the big one. We do have to talk about our Philadelphia Eagles, though, before we get out of here. They're now 11-5, picking up a 13-12 win over the Bills. And you can say this is an Eagles win or a Josh Allen complete collapse, because I think there's a lot of ways that Josh Allen has been overhyped this season. I've said it early on that it was very much James Cook carrying the early parts of this Bills season. Josh Allen made some crucial mistakes in this game, and now that kind of hurts their chances as well. They're now out of that division championship picture. The Eagles, on the other hand, you have Hurts go for 110 yards with 5 yards rushing. I'd like to see him rush a little bit more. Barkley with just 68 yards, A.J. Brown 68 yards, and you find Dallas Goedert in the back of the end zone. Does this Eagles team still have a real shot to make it in the Super Bowl, and is the defense enough to give you that kind of hype?
I think with the way they're playing now, no. I think that they really have to do.
This has been the way they played pretty much all year, though.
But they have to at some point do a 180 to where you can just get on a roll, because this offense has looked horrible. This defense is generational. The fact that they have consistently won them.
Such young players, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have 2 cornerbacks. Who could say the Eagles would have 2 cornerbacks in the Pro Bowl, especially 2 second-year Pro Bowlers and a linebacker, too? Like, this defense is just absolutely amazing. They're picking up wherever the offense is slacking, and I just don't know how much longer they can keep it up, because it has been like a 17-game stint of just the defense winning us football games. So
I need at least 21 points from the offense that I can trust the defense to hold to that. If you can't put up, 13 points and then just say, hey, defense, you can't let up 2 touchdowns. I can't play that.
We won this game because of a blocked extra point, pretty much, because then
they had to go for 2.
They didn't have to go for 2, but they decided to. But
even that decision, if you're the home team, why would you do that? If you're the road team, I get it. You don't want to go to overtime.
They really had they had nothing to play for. They had to have a Patriots loss in week 12 or week 18, so they really didn't have a chance to get anything else.
Then you're forcing the Patriots to play their starters. about a week.
True.
So
the Dolphins could probably play me, and I would beat the Dolphins.
Hey, Quinn Ewers, he's starting to turn it up. Did you have any other big takeaways this weekend in the NFL?
Just that 49ers-Bears game was one of the best games of the season, in my opinion, just back and forth the whole time. Brock Purdy, I've given Brock Purdy a lot of slack the whole season, and he played amazing against a good Bears defense. Had the pick six on the first play of the game, and then just turned it around and dominated with 303 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He looked like a magician back there. And that's not to say that the Bears played bad. Caleb Williams has been excellent all year long, and their run game has been elite. So just a great game overall. Yeah,
now I do want to ask, because this has been going on a lot this year, especially with the NFL and the way that they have played. Who is a true Super Bowl contender? You look at somebody like the Broncos. They're the 1 seed right now in the AFC. You're going to have the Patriots up there. You look at the Jaguars. They're going to be up at the top as well. On the NFC side of things, you're obviously going to have the West is going to be highly competitive. The Eagles will be there. The Bears are looking pretty dominant this year. But how many of those teams can you really, if you put them in a shaker and you shake out, the extras, who's going to stay in that entire picture? I would like to see Jacksonville make a run, but again, that's a team coming into the season that wasn't getting that hype. Same with the Chargers. They were really getting a lot of hype. The Chiefs, they're not in the playoffs. The Lions, I know they were a team that got a lot of hype. You might not see the Ravens. You're not going to see the Bengals. Some of these big teams with these big talented players aren't going to be able to see the playoff picture, and who can pretty much out of the scum make it in a real run.
I think in the AFC without the Chiefs, this is a wide open conference. I think any of those teams could beat each other. I think it's going to end up being who comes out of the NFC wins the championship. I think it's going to have to. I think right now the top teams are the Bears and the 49ers. I know the Bears, everyone keeps saying they haven't played good competition.
They beat us.
But they've been beating every team they play, and they win the games they need to. They just played a great 49ers defense and still put up 38 points. And I think the 49ers, well, yeah, they might not have the talent. Or they have the talent. But like everyone keeps disrespecting them, and I've been disrespecting them because of Brock Purdy. Name a team that they've lost to that was like a poor competition, or a game where they played poorly, because the Rams have lost to bad teams. The Seahawks have played horrible in games. And so to me, the 49ers are the team that has consistently been great all year long, even with Mac Jones at the helm. So to me, I think the 49ers are in the best position, and I think the Eagles, if they can get that offense going, I know I've said that all year long, but if they can get that going, I think it's Eagles, 49ers are the two teams that I have the best hopes for.
Yeah, I'm still high over here on the Patriots, and I'm still high on the Seahawks. Now that just might be a bit of me swallowing my own pride there and saying that I liked these teams in the beginning, so I got to ride them out. But I still love everything about the Seahawks team. That defense has been a lot better than I think anybody would have expected. Same with the Patriots. I mean, yes, they haven't played the greatest competition, but that's what you get when you're one of the worst teams. You get that easy schedule the following year, and they took advantage of it as they were able to vamp that offense up. Now we'll see what Stephon Diggs being out can do to them, what that entire situation will be. But with the Seahawks, I love that. Sam Darnold has not disappointed. Before we get out of here, though, as we are running up on my final show here of 2025, I want to thank everybody for tuning in this year. I was able to kick off Locker Room Buzz this year. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. You can always check me out at LRBuzz_pod on TikTok and Instagram. And then check out my website at Let's Talk Sports. That's Let's TAWK Sports.com for everything college football. And that will be a little bit of a revamp as well after the college football season. Get you guys the latest on possibly the MLB. So talk about all of that as well. Do want to get to our favorite plays of the season or of the year now that 2025 is wrapping up. There were lots to choose from. Maybe this is a little bit of a recency bias, but I'm going to take the Omar Cooper Jr. touchdown in the back of the end zone to defeat Penn State. Not even just the catch, but everything that came along with that game. That changed the season for Indiana. That was a huge win for them on the road. If they were losing to unranked Penn State, that would have bumped them back tremendously. Mendoza probably wouldn't get the Heisman, so huge moment there is Omar Cooper Jr.
Yeah, and I'm going to take Rory McIlroy winning the Masters, sinking that putt to finally get over that hump and finally get that jacket. To me, that was one of the best moments of the year.
Yeah, an honorable mention, USA versus Canada and the face-off, whatever they do, the national face-off now for the All-Star game. That was a lot of fun to watch as well. Lots to look forward to, though, in 2026 as well. Hopefully an Eagles Super Bowl to go back-to-back. The Panthers are looking to three-peat. That could be in 2026 as well in the NHL. Flyers might be making their first playoffs since 2020 and 2026. So lots to look forward to in 2026. I'll be here to give you guys the latest always and forever. So check that out as well here. This was Let's Talk Sports closing out for one final time here in 2025.